Canto 26. Joy to you, Florence, that your banners swell, beating their proud wings over land and sea, and that your name expands through all of hell. Among the thieves I found 5 who had been your citizens, to my shame, nor yet shall you mount to great honor peopling such a den. But if the truth is dreamed of toward the morning, you shall feel what Prato and the others wish for you. And were that day of mourning already come, it would not be so soon, so may it come since it must, for it will weigh more heavily on me as I pass my noon. We left that place. My guide climbed stone by stone the natural stair by which we had descended and drew me after him. So we passed on in going our lonely way through that dead land among the crags and crevices of the cliff. The foot could make no way without the hand. I mourned among those rocks, and I mourn again when memory returns to what I saw. And more than usually I curb the strain of my genius, lest it stray from virtue's course. So if some star or a better thing grant me merit, may I not find the gift cause for remorse. As many fireflies as the peasant sees when he rests on a hill and looks into the valley, where he tills or gathers grapes or prunes his trees, in that sweet season when the face of him who lights the world rides north, and at the hour when the fly yields to the gnat and the air grows dim. Such myriads of flames I saw shine through the gloom of the 8th abyss when I arrived at the rim from which its bed comes into view. As he the bears avenged so fearfully beheld Elijah's chariot depart, the horses rise toward heaven, but could not see more than the flame, a cloudlet in the sky once it had risen, so within the fosse only those flames forever passing by were visible ahead, to right, to left. For though each steals a sinner's soul from view, not one among them leaves a trace of the theft. I stood on the bridge and leaned out from the edge so far that but for a jut of rock I held to, I should have been sent hurtling from the edge without being pushed. And seeing me so intent, my guide said, "There are souls within those flames. Each sinner swathes himself in his own torment." "Master," I said, "your words make me more sure, but I had seen already that it was so, and meant to ask what spirit must endure the pains of that great flame which splits away in 2 great horns, as if it rose from the pyre where Eteocles and Polynices lay." He answered me, "Forever round this path Ulysses and Diomed move in such dress, united in pain as once they were in wrath. There they lament the ambush of the horse, which was the door through which the noble seed of the Romans issued from its holy source. There they mourn that for Achilles slain, sweet Daidamia weeps even in death. There they recall the Palladium in their pain." "Master," I cried, "I pray you and re-pray till my prayer becomes 1,000. If these souls can still speak from the fire, oh, let me stay." Until the flame draws near. Do not deny me, you see how fervently I long for it. And he to me, "Since what you ask is worthy, it shall be, but be still and let me speak, for I know your mind already, and they perhaps might scorn your manner of speaking since they were Greek. And when the flame had come where time and place seemed fitting to my God, I heard him say these words to it: "O you two souls who pace together in one flame, if my days above won favor in your eyes, if I have earned however much or little of your love, in writing my high verses, do not pass by, but let one of you be pleased to tell where he, having disappeared from the known world, went to die." As if it fought the wind, the greater prong of the ancient flame began to quiver and hum. Then, moving its tip as if it were the tongue that spoke, gave out a voice above the roar. "When I left Circe," it said, "who more than a year detained me near Geta long before, Aeneas came and gave the place that name. Not fondness for my son, nor reverence for my aged father, nor Penelope's claim to the joys of love could drive out my mind the lust to experience the far-flung world and the failings and felicities of mankind. I put out on the high and open sea with a single ship, and only those few souls who stayed true when the rest deserted me. As far as Morocco and as far as Spain, I saw both shores, and I saw Sardinia and the other islands of the open main. I and my men were stiff and slow with age when we sailed at last into the narrow pass, where, warning all men back from further voyage, Hercules' pillars rose upon our sight. Already I had left Ceuta on the left. Seville now sank behind me on the right. "Shipmates," I said, "who through 100,000 perils have reached the west, do not deny to the brief remaining watch our senses stand. Experience of the world beyond the sun. Greeks, you were not born to live like brutes, but to press on toward manhood and recognition." With this brief exhortation, I made my crew so eager for the voyage I could hardly have held them back from it when I was through. And turning our stern toward morning, our bow toward night, we bore southwest out of the world of man. We made wings of our oars for our fool's flight. That night we raised the other pole ahead with all its stars, and ours had so declined it did not rise out of its ocean bed. 5 times since we had dipped our bending oars beyond the world, the light beneath the moon had waxed and waned, when dead upon our course we sighted dark in space a peak so tall I doubted any man had seen the like. Our cheers were hardly sounded when a squall broke hard upon our bow from the new land. 3 times it sucked the ship and the sea about as it pleased, another to order and command. At the 4th, the poop rose and the bow went down till the sea closed over us and the light was gone. Canto 27. When it had finished speaking, the great flame stood tall and shook no more. Now as it left us with the sweet poet's license, another came along that track, and our attention turned to the new flame. A strange and muffled roar rose from the single tip to which it burned, as the Sicilian bull, that brazen spit which bellowed first and properly enough, with the lament of him whose file had tuned it, was made to bellow by its victim's cries in such a way that though it was of brass, it seemed itself to howl and agonize. So lacking any way through or around the fire that sealed them in, the mournful words were changed into its language when they found their way up to the tip, imparting to it the same vibration given them in their passage over the tongue of the concealed sad spirit. We heard it say, "O you at whom I aim my voice, and who were speaking Lombard, saying, "Go now, I ask no more, just as I came, though I may come a bit late to my turn. May it not annoy you to pause and speak a while. You see, it does not annoy me, and I burn. If you have fallen only recently to this blind world from that sweet Italy where I acquired my guilt, I pray you tell me, is there peace or war in Romagna? For on earth I too was of those hills between Urbino and the fold from which the Tiber springs to birth. I was still staring at it from the dim edge of the pit when my guide nudged me, saying, 'This one is Italian, you speak to him.' My answer was framed already. Without pause, I spoke these words to it: 'O hidden soul, your sad Romagna is not and never was without war in her tyrant's raging blood, but none flared openly when I left just now. Ravenna's fortunes stand as they have stood these many years. Polenta's eagles brood over her walls, and their pinions cover Servia. The city that so valiantly withstood the French and raised a mountain of their dead feels the green claws again, still in Verruccio, the aged mastiff and his pup who shed Montagna's blood, raven in their old ranges. The cities of Lamone and Centarno are led by the white den's lion, he who changes his politics with the compass. And as the city the Savio washes lies between plain and mountain, so it lives between freedom and tyranny. Now I beg you, let us know your name. Do not be harder than one has been to you. So too you will preserve your earthly fame. And when the flame had roared a while beneath the ledge on which we stood, it swayed its tip to and fro and then gave forth this breath. If I believed that my reply were made to one who could ever climb to the world again, this flame would shake no more. But since no shade ever returned, if what I am told is true, from this blind world into the living light, without fear of dishonor, I answer you. I was a man of arms, then took the rope of the Franciscans, hoping to make amends, and surely I should have won to all my hope, but for the great priest, may he rot in hell, who brought me back to all my earlier sins, and how and why it happened I wish to tell in my own words while I was still encased in the pulp and bone my mother bore. My deeds were not of the lion, but of the fox. I raced through tangled ways, all wiles were mine from birth, and I won such advantage with my arts that rumor of me reached the ends of the earth. But when I saw before me all the signs of the time of life that cautions every man to lower his sail and gather in his lines, that which had pleased me once troubled my spirit, and penitent and confessed, I became a monk. Alas, what joy I might have had of it! It was then the prince of the new Pharisees drew his sword and marched upon the Lateran, and not against the Saracen or the Jew, for every man that stood against his hand was a Christian soul. Not one had warred on acre, nor been a traitor in the Sultan's land. It was he abused his sacred vows and mine, his office and the cord I wore, which once made those it girded leaner, as Constantine sent for Silvestro to cure his leprosy, seeking him out among Soracte's cells. So this one from his great throne sent for me to cure the fever of pride that burned his blood. He demanded my advice, and I kept silent, for his words seemed drunken to me. So it stood until he said, "Your soul need fear no wound. I absolve your guilt beforehand, and now teach me how to smash penestrino to the ground. The gates of heaven, as you know, are mine to open and shut, for I hold the two great keys so easily let go by Celestine. His weighty arguments led me to fear silence was worse than sin. Therefore I said, Holy Father, since you clean me here of the guilt into which I fall, let it be done. Long promise and short observance is the road that leads to the sure triumph of your throne. Later, when I was dead, St. Francis came to claim my soul, but one of the black angels said, Leave him, do not wrong me. This one's name went into my book the moment he resolved to give false counsel. Since then he has been mine, for who does not repent cannot be absolved. Nor can we admit the possibility of repenting a thing at the same time it is willed, for the two acts are contradictory. Miserable me, with what contrition I shuddered when he lifted me, saying, Perhaps you hadn't heard that I was a logician. He carried me to Minos 8 times round. His scabby back the monster coiled his tail, then biting in rage he pawed the ground and cried, This one is for the thievish fire, and as you see, I am lost accordingly, grieving in heart as I go in this attire. His story told, the flame began to toss and writhe its horn, and so it left, and we crossed over the arch of the next fosse, where from the iron treasury of the Lord the fee of wrath is paid, and the sowers of discord. Canto 28. Who could describe even words set free of metric and rhyme, and 1,000 times retold the blood and wounds that now were shown to me? At grief so deep the tongue must wag in vain. The language of our sense and memory lacks the vocabulary of such pain. If one could gather all those who have stood through all of time on Puglia's fateful soil and wept for the red running of their blood in the war of the Trojans, and in that long war which left so vast a spoil of golden rings as we find written in Livy, who does not err, along with those whose bodies felt the wet and gaping wounds of Robert Guiscard's lances, with all the rest whose bones are gathered yet at Caperano, where every last Pugliese turned traitor, and with those from Tagliacozzo, where Alardo won without weapons. If all these were gathered, and one showed his limbs run through, another his lopped off, that could not equal the mutilations of the 9th Pitt's crew. A wine tun, when a stave or cant bar starts, does not split open as wide as one I saw split from his chin to the mouth with which man farts. Between his legs all of his red guts hung, with the heart, the lungs, the liver, the gallbladder, and the shriveled sack that passes shit to the bung. I stood and stared at him from the stone shelf. He noticed me, and opening his own breast, with both hands cried, See how I rip myself. See how Muhammad's mangled and split open. Ahead of me walks Ali in his tears, his head cleft from the top knot to the chin, and all the other souls that bleed and mourn along this ditch were sowers of scandal and schism. As they tore others apart, so are they torn. Behind us, warden of our mangled horde, the devil who butchers us and sends us marching waits to renew our wounds with his long sword when we have made the circuit of the pit, for by the time we stand again before him, all the wounds he gave us last have knit. But who are you that gawk down from that sill, probably to put off your own descent to the pit you are sentenced to for your own evil. Death has not come for him, guilt does not drive his soul to torment, my sweet God replied, that he may experience all while yet alive. I, who am dead, must lead him through the drear and darkened halls of hell from round to round, and this is true as my own standing here. More than 100 wraiths who were marching under the sill on which we stood paused at his words and stared at me, forgetting pain and wonder. And if you do indeed return to see the sun again and soon, tell Fra Dolcino, unless he longs to come and march with me, he would do well to check his groceries before the winter drives him from the hills and gives the victory to the Novaries. Muhammad, 1 foot raised, had paused to say these words to me. When he had finished speaking, he stretched it out and down and moved away. Another, he had his throat slit and his nose slashed off, as far as the eyebrows, and a wound where one of his ears had been, standing with those who stared at me in wonder from the pit, opened the grinning wound of his red gullet as if it were a mouth, and said through it, O soul unforfeited to misery, and whom, unless I take you for another, I have seen above in our sweet Italy, if ever again you see the gentle plain that slopes down from Vercelli to Marcabo, remember Pierre da Medicina in pain, and announce this warning to the noblest two of Fano, Messrs. Guido and Angiolello, that unless our foresight sees what is not true, they shall be thrown from their ships into the sea and drowned in the raging tides near La Cattolica to satisfy a tyrant's treachery. Neptune never saw so gross a crime in all the seas from Cyprus to Majorca, not even in pirate raids nor the Argive time, the one-eyed traitor, lord of the Demesne, whose hill and streams one who walks here beside me will wish eternally he had never seen. We'll call them to a parley, but behind sweet invitations he will work it so they need not pray against Foccara's wind. And I to him, if you would have me bear your name to time, show me the one who found the site of that land so harsh, and let me hear his story and his name. He touched the cheek of one nearby, forcing the jaws apart, and said, this is the one. He cannot speak. This outcast settled Caesar's doubts that day beside the Rubicon by telling him, a man prepared is a man hurt by delay. Ah, how wretched Curio seemed to me, with a bloody stump in his throat in place of the tongue, which once had dared to speak so recklessly. And one among them, with both arms hacked through, cried out, raising his stumps on the foul air, while the blood bedaubed his face, remember too Mosca de Lamberti, alas, who said a thing done has an end, and with those words planted the fields of war with Tuscan dead, and brought about the death of all your clan. I said, and he, stung by new pain on pain, ran off, and in his grief he seemed a madman. I stayed to watch those broken instruments, and I saw a thing so strange I should not dare to mention it without more evidence, but that my own clear conscience strengthens me, that good companion that upholds a man within the armor of his purity. I saw it there. I seemed to see it still. A body without a head that moved along like all the others that in that spew and spill. It held the severed head by its own hair, swinging it like a lantern in its hand. And the head looked at us and wept in its despair. It made itself a lamp of its own head, and they were two in one and one in two. How this can be, he knows who so commanded. And when it stood directly under us, it raised the head at arm's length toward our bridge, the better to be heard. And swaying thus it cried, O living soul in this abyss, see what a sentence has been passed upon me, and search all hell for one to equal this. When you return to the world, remember me. I am Bertrand de Born, and it was I who set the young king on to mutiny, son against father, father against son, as Achitophel set Absalom and David. And since I parted those who should be one, in duty and in love I bear my brain divided from its source within this trunk, and walk here where my evil turns to pain. An eye for an eye to all eternity, thus is the law of hell observed in me. Canto 29. The sight of that parade of broken dead had left my eyes so sotted with their tears I longed to stay and weep, but Virgil said, What are you waiting for? Why do you stare as if you could not tear your eyes away from the mutilated shadows passing there? You did not act so in the other pits. Consider, if you mean perhaps to count them, this valley and its train of dismal spirits winds 22 miles round. The moon already is under our feet. The time we have is short, and there is much that you have yet to see. Had you known what I was seeking, I replied, you might perhaps have given me permission to stay on longer. As I spoke, my guide had started off already, and I in turn had moved along behind him. Thus I answered as we moved along the cliff. Within that cavern upon whose brim I stood so long to stare, I think a spirit of my own blood mourns the guilt that sinners find so costly there. And the master then, hereafter let your mind turn its attention to more worthy matters, and leave him to his fate among the blind. For by the bridge and among that shapeless crew, I saw him point to you with threatening gestures, and I heard him called Gary Del Bello. You were occupied at the time with that headless one who in his life was master of Altaforte, and did not look that way, so he moved on. O my sweet God, I answered, his death came by violence and is not yet avenged by those who share his blood, and thus his shame. For this he surely hates his kin, and therefore, as I suppose, he would not speak to me, and in that he makes me pity him the more. We spoke of this until we reached the edge, from which, had there been light, we could have seen the floor of the next pit. Out of that ledge, Maelbog's final cloister lay outspread, and all of its lay brethren might have been in sight but for the murk. And from those dead such shrieks, strangled agonies shrilled through me like shafts, but barbed with pity, that my hands flew to my ears. If all the misery that crams the hospitals of pestilence in Maremma, Valdiciano, and Sardinia in the summer months, when death sits like a presence on the marsh air, we dumped into one trench that might suggest their pain, and through the screams putrid flesh spread up its sickening stench. Still bearing left, we passed from the long sill to the last bridge of Maelbog. There the reeking bottom was more visible, There, high justice, sacred mistress of the first father, reigns eternally over the falsifiers in their distress. I doubt it could have been such pain to bear the sight of the Aegean people dying, that time when such malignance rode the air, that every beast down to the smallest worm shriveled and died. It was after that great plague that the ancient people, as the poets affirm, were reborn from the ants. As it was to see the spirits lying heaped on one another in the dank bottom of that fetid valley. One lay gasping on another's shoulder, one on another's belly, and some were crawling on hands and knees among the broken boulders. Silent, slow, step by step, we moved ahead, looking at and listening to those souls too weak to raise themselves from their stone bed. I saw two there, like two pans that are put one against the other to hold their warmth. They were covered with great scabs from head to foot. No stable boy in a hurry to go home, or for whom his master waits impatiently, ever scrubbed harder with his curry comb than those two spirits of the stinking ditch scrubbed at themselves with their own bloody claws to ease the furious burning of the itch. And as they scrubbed and clawed themselves, their nails drew down the scabs the way a knife scrapes bream or some other fish with even larger scales. Oh, you, my guide, called out to one, you there who rip your scabby mail as if your fingers were claws and pincers, tell us if this layer counts any Italians among those who lurk in its dark depths. So may your busy nails eternally suffice you for your work. We both are Italian, whose unending loss you see before you, he replied in tears. But who are you who come to question us? I am a shade, my guide and master said, who leads this living man from pit to show him hell as I have been commanded. The sinners broke apart as he replied, and turned convulsively to look at me, as others did who overheard my guide. My master, then ever concerned for me, turned and said, ask them whatever you wish. And I said to those two wraiths of misery, so may the memory of your names and actions not die forever from the minds of men in that first world, but live for many sons. Tell me who you are, and of what city. Do not be shamed by your nauseous punishment into concealing your identity. I was a man of Arezzo, one replied, and Albert of Siena had me burned. But I am not here for the deed for which I died. It is true that jokingly I said to him once, I know how to raise myself and fly through air, and he, with all the eagerness of a dunce, wanted to learn, because I could not make a Daedalus of him. For no other reason he had his father burn me at the stake. But Minos, the infallible, had me hurled here to the final Bolgia of the 10, for the alchemy I practiced in the world. And I to the poet, was there ever a race more vain than the Sienese? Even the French compared to them seem full of modest grace. And the other leper answered mockingly, excepting Stricca, who by careful planning managed to live and spend so moderately. And Niccolo, who in his time above was first of all the shoots in that rank garden to discover the costly uses of the clove, and accepting the brilliant company of talents in which Caccia squandered his vineyards, in his woods, and Abbagliato displayed his intelligence. But if you wish to know who joins our cry against the Sienes. Study my face with care and let it make its own reply. So you will see I am the suffering shadow of Capoccio, who, by practicing alchemy, falsified the metals, and you must know, unless my mortal recollection strays, how good an ape I was of nature's ways.